Hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Invest with Trent podcast. My name is Trent. On the show with me today is a fellow by the name of Shawn George from Limitless Capital. Shawn used to work for Microsoft, I think it was 2018, and then he was caught up in a round of layoffs, and he decided that he did not want to ever go through that situation again.
I was working at Microsoft in tech sales about 8 years, and in 2018, Microsoft did their first RIF, or their first reduction in force. Fancy word for layoff. I was a top performer ahead, but he got the pink slip in the mail, and that was a big surprise. But it was also a wake-up call.
And then he asked himself the question, how can I start generating passive income to the tune of around $15,000 a month so that I don't ever have to go through the financial stress or having to rely on a W-2 job again like I have in the past. The problem that Shawn faced and that many of us face is that we don't necessarily have sufficient capital to be able to invest at, say, 8 or 9%, which is a generous return at that, to be able to generate that $15,000 a month in passive income.
How do I replace my income with passive cash flow or passive income? My problem statement back then was if I could make $15,000 a month passively, that would be financial freedom. That was equivalent to about my base salary at Microsoft at the time. So I started looking around for what kind of investment schemes or mechanisms would give me $15K a month. I looked at And what I found was that most investment mechanisms would give you about 8 to 10 to 12% cash on cash return.
So in this episode, we're going to talk about two things primarily. Thing number one is the vehicle that Shawn figured out that allowed him to get to the point where he was generating that amount of income from real estate. And then thing number two, where we're going to spend a fair amount of time, is how a significant loss of $500,000 loss led Shawn to creating an AI-enabled due diligence process to make sure that he didn't go through that experience again, or at least significantly decrease the likelihood of going through a due diligence error again. And I realize that for many of the folks that watch my show, you might be newer to investing in real estate. You might be running your own tech company or your tech executives or whatever it is that you're doing, and you're not an expert. And the number one thing probably holding you back from becoming a limited partner where you can generate passive income without having to manage the deal is fear of getting it wrong and then losing the money that you put in. So I think you'll find this episode particularly interesting because you're going to get a behind the curtains look at how a professional investor is using AI to be able to, as best as possible, mitigate or minimize those risks to decrease the probability as much as possible that a loss would take place. So with that said, please join me in welcoming Shawn to the show. Hey, Shawn, welcome to the Invest with Trent podcast. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Trent. It's a pleasure to be here.
For the folks in my audience who don't know who you are or anything about you, let's start there. Let's get a brief answer to how did you go from your first deal all the way to where you are now running the Limitless Fund?
Yeah, so it's been a bit of a journey. To take you a few years back, Trent, was working at Microsoft, working kind of your W-2 job in tech sales. I was at Microsoft about 8 years, and in 2018, Microsoft did their first RIF, or their first reduction in force. Fancy word for layoff. And I was surprised, right? I was a top performer, had something like 3 level increases in 4 years, which is pretty significant if you're there. But he got the pink slip in the mail, and that was a big surprise. But it was also a wake-up call, right? And I say it was the biggest kind of blessing in disguise. One of the best things that ever happened to me in retrospect, because it made me think about how do I replace my income with passive cash flow or passive income? And my problem statement back then was if I could make $15,000 a month passively, that would be financial freedom. That was equivalent to about my base salary at Microsoft at the time. So I started looking around for what kind of investment schemes or mechanisms would give me $15K a month. And I looked at multifamily investing, fix and flips, put a dadu in your backyard, triple net leases, private lending, pretty much everything that you could look at, buying a business. And what I found was that most investment mechanisms would give you about 8 to 10 to 12% cash on cash return per year. which was great if you have a few $1 million lying around. If you have 2, 3 million bucks lying around, then yeah, totally invest 8, 10, 12%. You'll make 150 to 180K a year. But what if you don't? And that's
Yeah.
the big sort of question I think a lot of people are asking is, yeah, I might have some of that money in my 401k or someplace I don't want to touch, but not really the liquid cash to just invest. So then the question became for me, how do I generate that first 1 or 2 or 3 million? And that's what took me down the road of new construction in 2021. Happened to randomly meet a local home builder, found out what he was doing, and he was returning about 50%, 50% to his investors in about 2 years. And I was like, wow, that's a lot better than 8, 10, 12%. I was like, suddenly lights came on, big kind of eureka moment. I was like, huh, that's how I can take 250, 500K and turn that into my first 1 or 2 or 3 million. And so we actually did that. We took 450,000 from our HELOC, our home equity line of credit, and that became our first million through new construction.
Nice. So
And
that's
today
actually a
yeah. I was going to say, I tried to finish the story there. Today we've got about 40 homes under construction, about 65 million of real estate being built today.
phenomenal. And that's one of the reasons why I invited you onto the show. When I read several of your posts on LinkedIn, it looked like you'd gotten a lot of traction. And I thought, man, this guy's got to have some good lessons to share with other tech exec. I get a lot of tech execs and SaaS owners that listen to my show. And so I thought you with the Microsoft background, they would also be able to relate to you a lot more, because I'm sure many of them have the same concerns. How do I create, how do I diversify my wealth? How do I maybe save some taxes? How do I generate some passive income? All things that we're going to talk about in this episode and many more to come. So let's start off with a little bit of your track record. We're going to talk about first a good deal that you did, your most successful project. And then we're going to talk about something that didn't go so well and how you turned that lesson into a system to prevent that bad experience from not happening again. So let's start first with the win. Walk us through your most successful completed project and then describe, as you're doing that, what made it work.
Yeah, great question, Trent. We probably most successful one to date has been we took a piece of raw land, about an acre in Greater Seattle. We bought it for about 1.6 million, and it had a nasty tear down house. It was one of those trustee sales, basically. And the house was, funny story, the house was in such bad condition that after we closed on the property, we actually saw this random Facebook post that said, "Hey, this is what you get in Washington for 1.6 million, right? In this nasty tear down house." It was just, and we were like, haha, that's the one that we actually bought.
Yeah.
Just the power of new construction, if you will. We were able to short plat that 1 acre into 5 lots. And each of those finished homes will sell for about $2.5 million each. So you take 1.6, our total bill cost is about $5 million for all 5 homes. So we're in it for about 7.5 million, and it'll be 12.5, 13 million when it's all said and done. So
Over what period of
pretty
time?
good returns. And we were basically about 4 years. So
Okay.
our investors will make 30% annualized returns, or basically double their money in about 4 years.
Which makes people pretty happy for sure. So now let's
Yep.
talk about the experience that you shared with me when we talked before. If my memory serves me correctly, you took a $500,000 pill. In other words, you lost 500 grand on a deal. Am I remembering that correctly? Do you want to tell us about that?
That is correct. Sad but true. Yeah. No, these are the type of deals that don't really make the headlines, right? No
Mm-hmm.
investor really wants to talk about the quote unquote expensive lessons, right? There are no regrets, just expensive lessons, right? And yeah, it was a scenario. It was a land development deal, and basically it was at the outset we're going to make double our money in a very short amount of time, but one of the challenges with that particular deal was that the operator or the sponsor was under a time crunch, right? They had literally a few days to make a decision. We were called in at the 13th hour to help fund the deal, right? And frankly, we depended on just relationship. And I think, for example, a lot of things in real estate are done by
Yep.
relationship. It's a very relational business. And do you know and trust a person, right? So we had like about a 3 or 4 year relationship with the sponsor, believed he was a good guy and knew what he was talking about. So we invest in this deal. And we didn't ask all the questions. And looking back, right, so we rushed. Our typical due diligence process at the time would take 2, 3 weeks, but we didn't have that luxury of time. We had a few days. And so we rushed that period, believing we had this positive relationship, believing we had a solid operator, and didn't ask as many questions about the deal as we should have. And I think looking back, if we had things like AI or these custom GPTs or whatever back then, it would have been really easy to run a fairly full-fledged due diligence report on this deal, and we could have done that in a matter of hours and asked many more intelligent questions about the deal, and perhaps not invested in that deal and saved $500,000. In hindsight, I think that's actually one of the reasons that we use AI a lot more today, because this scenario happens a lot in real estate. You're up against the gun, clock is ticking. You're making these, not I wouldn't say emotional decisions, but you're making very just qualitative decisions versus quantitative.
Yeah.
And I think can help you be more quantitative in a short amount of time.
And so that's where I want to spend a fair amount of the time that we're talking today, is helping the audience, who many of whom probably, if they haven't invested in a deal yet, are probably thinking about it. That's why they're listening to the show. And most assuredly, there's some fear in there of them making a mistake because they don't know what they're doing yet. They don't have the experience and the perspective yet. And they're looking at the offering memorandums like everybody else who's looking at becoming a limited partner in some other sponsor's deal. By the way, for folks, if you don't know what sponsor means, it's the general partner. It's the person running the deal. So using AI tools, which many of my tech-enabled audience is very familiar with, will, like it did for you, help them to save a lot of time and create a lot more comfort that they're not about to make maybe it won't be a $500,000 mistake, but people don't even want to make a $50,000 mistake or even a $20,000 mistake. Who the hell likes losing money? Nobody. So you've got this problem. Right. You've got this problem. Your current state, or it's the past state now, was due diligence takes a lot of time. And so we maybe miss opportunities on occasion because we don't have sufficient time. Or if we don't have good processes, maybe we forget or skip some steps in due diligence, which also is not a good idea. And also we want to make sure that we don't eat any more $500,000 pills, because that's no fun at all. So take us back in time to, you haven't created this GPT yet. Like, first of all, tell the audience, what is a GPT? And then walk us through the step-by-step on how you actually built this thing so that it became an effective due diligence process that you could trust and iterate on to be better over time.
Yeah, how we got into this, I think AI kind of gives us this clarity at speed, right? Bad deals don't always come from bad people. They come from more incomplete information, right?
Mm-hmm.
And AI can help fix that. In the case of how we approach these GPTs, I think it's going to really help democratize how we underwrite real estate. It's typical for, unfortunately, first-time investors to lose money. It happens all the time. And just because they may not understand all the metrics that come along with a deal. They may not understand current like jargon like yield on cost or DSCR, or what is the overall IRR of the opportunity, or there's so many acronyms and so many metrics.
Yeah.
And we can look as first time, and I've been guilty of this too, as a first time investor, you look at a fancy PowerPoint or a fancy spreadsheet and you're like, oh, that sponsor knows what they're doing, right? It's clear because the PowerPoint looks sexy and the Excel spreadsheet looks complicated. Therefore, they know what they're doing. But that's obviously that's a very qualitative decision, right?
Yeah.
It took me a good probably 5 years to figure out 100% or like fully what an Excel spreadsheet was actually saying, beyond just the first executive summary tab, but actually drill into all the other tabs. And now I can create those pro formas. I can read those pro formas backwards and forwards. But that took me 5, 10 years being in real estate. And now imagine doing that for all these different asset classes, commercial triple net, or private lending, or multifamily rehab or buy and hold. These are all fundamentally different types of assets, and they all have different structures. And so where I think AI sort of helps democratize that for us is that, and what we actually do today is we can feed, like the first thing that I do when I receive, because we fund all types of real estate deals. And so I'll have sponsors hitting me up with some random, say, commercial deal. And the first thing I do is I take that Excel pro forma and that OM, that operating memorandum, and I feed that into, in my case, ChatGPT, into one of our custom GPTs, and I say, hey, I just received this OM and this pro forma. Help me underwrite this deal. And what questions should I ask the sponsor based on what information is being presented,
And by
right?
the way,
And
just in
so,
case the audience
um,
doesn't know what an OM is, it stands for offering memorandum. It's basically the big
yep.
shiny brochure that says you should invest here because, and then the pro forma is just the math equations that investors would look at. Sorry to interrupt you.
Precisely. No, that's great, Trent. And the cool thing with AI and with these GPTs is it doesn't care about the beautiful graphics and the font color and if it looks sexy or not. It just looks at the cold hard data. And if the data is not there, it'll tell me, hey, this data is missing. And it probably makes sense for you to ask this question about this deal. And it'll look at, for example, hey, the stabilization period, which is the period that it takes for a vacant building to be occupied.
Mm-hmm.
The stabilization period is, according to the pro forma, is say 3 months, when in the market or in that zip code, typically we're seeing 6 months or 9 months. And so those kind of details can make or break a deal, but they can easily get missed if you're not experienced underwriting these deals.
So then take us back to that first time. Because I've done this myself. I've been investing in commercial real estate now for quite a few years. Didn't use AI in the beginning, makes my life a whole lot easier now. I
Yep.
don't have any custom GPTs. And I sent you a copy of one of my diligence. So I basically take the OM, I upload it, and I say, this is a deal I'm looking at investing in. Is this a good? And so one of the things that I do, and maybe you'd cover this in a GPT, and I really want to understand what the GPT is, but before we get into that, I'm just comparing the kind of simple version. I have a document that I upload to the AI that's my investor profile. Talks about me, my goals, my net worth, the whole thing. So the AI knows about me and what I've done and what my goals are. So I don't have to tell it that every time. So then I can just say, here's a deal I'm looking at. Should I invest in this deal? What are some of the risks I'm going to expose myself to? And what are some of the questions that I should ask the sponsor? And it pumps me out an answer and I look at it and then I make more decisions and I ask more questions. So that's a relatively, I think it's a simple process. You've got a GPT, which is an area that I'm not an expert in. How does a GPT differ from what I just described? First, that's the first part of my question. So I'll let you answer that.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's a great question, Trent. So a custom GPT at a basic level is just basically a super custom prompt. And so a prompt, for example, is literally what you just described. It's a question, it's a query that you asked that particular bot or that particular GPT. And most GPTs out of the box will give you fairly solid answers. They'll give you 80, 90% there. A custom GPT just helps structure the input and the output to be much more kind of formulaic, right? For example, we have probably like a dozen GPTs we're using today, but one of them that we call the new construction analyzer is we'll take that OM, that offering memorandum, and it will actually break it up into 10 sections, each comprising one part of the deal. So executive summary, financial, track record, so on and so forth. And so it really at a basic level is it's just a structured input and output. And on the back end, what we do to create these quote unquote custom GPTs is we are telling ChatGPT or Claude or whichever engine that you're using, this is what you should do and this is what you should not do. So we're giving it a bunch of rules, and basically it's those rules put together that create a quote unquote custom GPT.
Got it.
Now there's, yeah, and now you can, and that's at a basic level. So all the ones that we offer for free, for example, at limitlessgpts.com are basically highly customized rule sets and prompts, basically. Now the next level is doing what's called agents, if you've heard the term AI agents or agentic AI. And that is definitely the next level. And that's where you can take not just prompts, but you can actually have an agent or a bot that's running multi-step workflows for you, actually
N8N?
connecting to third party. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So N8N, Make.com, Zapier, these are all connections or connectors that basically help you connect it to third party databases. So, for example, we have a land feasibility GPT that actually will connect into, for example, ArcGIS, which is it's an architecture software that if you're an architect, you would know about it. But it helps you, it not only checks the county records for, what's the local zoning parameters or local zoning codes, or how high of a building can I build or how wide of a building can I build, but it'll also check survey information and topographic information as far as the actual site survey and stuff. And so there you're connecting multiple data sources along with the custom prompts and delivering a much, much more robust sort of answer than just a single line, hey, give me the land feasibility of XYZ parcel. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I don't think we'll go too far down that rabbit hole because I suspect that the vast majority of people watching this are not going to become GPs. They're much more likely to become LPs, limited partners. What they want to do is make sure that, like we talked about earlier, they're evaluating the sponsor's capabilities and track record. They're evaluating the deal and the opportunity and the risks they're exposed to. And they're given a good list of questions that will allow them to ask smart questions of the sponsor to help further quantify whether that's the right deal for them or not. And as I described earlier on, you definitely don't have to create an agent to do that. You may over time want to create a GPT to do it, but at a bare minimum, even if you aren't ready to go down the rabbit hole of creating a GPT, you can create just a simple project on Claude or on ChatGPT. And that way, every time you start a new chat within that project folder, the GPT has a memory of all of the other chats that you've had within that folder. So as you're uploading more OMs and proformas over time, and you're telling the GPT, I like this one because I don't like this one because, it's going to learn more and more about you. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%, Trent. Yeah. As an LP, I think you can get 98% of the value of AI just from exactly what you described. Upload the OM, upload the pro forma, say, hey, go through this. I would recommend download one of our free GPTs. It's completely free. All information stays in your instance. So we're not seeing any of the questions that you ask those GPTs. You're literally just copying our rule set and our custom prompts in the back end over to your instance of ChatGPT or Claude. But you're welcome to just start with the basic out of the box one, and it'll give you, again, most of the information that you need.
So
And exactly, and I would highly recommend going for the paid subscription of these things or these AI models, because that way you can use things like memory and make sure that your data is staying persistent. Yeah.
When someone copies one of your free GPTs into their account, are they going to be able to see under the hood and see the criteria or the questions or whatever you did to create that GPT? And are they going to be able to edit it in whatever way they would like to?
Yeah, no, great question. We are happy the way ChatGPT works is they have what's called a GPT store. So we've put our stuff into the GPT store. So unfortunately, they don't let you see behind the curtain or behind the scenes for any custom GPTs in the GPT store. But if any of your listeners, Trent, want the actual rule set, happy to send it, happy to share. And then that way they can create or modify or create their own.
That's cool. Why don't we do this, if you're okay with it? Being as we've been talking about your due diligence GPT, could you send me a link and I'll put it in the video description where people can go and get that rule set? Is that possible?
Yeah, absolutely. If you go to, it's just limitlessgpts.com, and we have there's probably a dozen or so cards there. If you just click on due diligence GPT, you'll be able to open that in your instance. And then you can actually just ask a question right there, provide the rule set behind this GPT, and it'll surface all that.
Oh, cool. Didn't think of doing that because I've played with it a bit, but I never thought of asking it that question. All right. So how do you know that and I'll couch this question on the GPT angle. When you've built this GPT, how do you know the output's any good? Obviously, your experience, which you have in abundance, is going to help you to know. But for someone who has less experience, how do they know they're getting a good output? Because GPT ain't perfect.
No, and that's a great question, Trent. I think early on, ChatGPT version 2, 3, 4, some of the earlier versions, I think we're up to 5 right now. Grok is on 5, etc. But some of the earlier versions just made up crap, right? Just there
Oh
was
yeah.
hallucinations, there was just like, and that's actually where I think AI has some limits. And where ultimately it does come back to you being intelligent, right? This is artificial intelligence, this is augmented intelligence, it's whatever fill in the blank. But ultimately, you do need to have some intelligence, right? You do need to be able to distinguish. Now, I'm seeing 95% accuracy with the latest versions, ChatGPT 5 and Grok 5 and Claude. They're very good. But every once in a while, I'll definitely catch things, and you do have to be able to have enough experience to recognize that this is garbage or it's not, right? Now, and devil's in the details. So you do have to kind of read the output line by line and make sure it's not just making things up. Yeah, ultimately you do have to have expertise in the field that you're using it in. And for your LPs, Trent, who maybe just starting out or maybe been investing in real estate for a few years, personally, we would also recommend having having a board of advisors, well, in whatever fashion that looks like for you, to make sure it's not just AI that you're trusting,
Mhm.
right? You've also got some other people to talk to. So we advise communities, we advise meetups, whatever, build that community around you and don't just trust AI. So
Agree. There's no substitute for having a human mentor. So my hack for that is do this. I'll take the OM and I'll upload it to multiple AI tools. I'll compare the answers from one tool to another tool. I'll then have follow-on questions saying, I'll just say, do it again, analyze it again. I might even do
yeah,
that 2 or 3 times. Then I'll ask questions like, what risks am I exposed to that we haven't talked about yet? And really try and have an interactive discussion as opposed to just an input and an output, because the AI
yeah,
will admit when it makes mistakes, because it definitely does it. And then once you've been through that process on your own for a while, you can create your own summary document and then go meet with your mentor, your human mentor, and say, hey, look, this is the
yep,
OM. This is the research that I did. This is the output. These are my concerns. What's your opinion on this particular deal? And I think having a mentor can
yep.
go a very long way. And I think most folks who've been in real estate for a good amount of time, like yourself, know that networking is key. It's the key in many industries, probably all industries,
Mhm.
but in real estate, absolutely for sure. Be networking, be talking. It's not hard. Go talk to brokers. Brokers are wealth. They're a
Yep.
wealth of information. They've seen lots of deals. They've seen deals go well. They've seen deals go badly. I think many of them would be happy to go have a lunch with you or have a coffee with you, because in their eyes, they're always
Yep.
seeing there's a potential opportunity for future business. And so they're in the business of talking to people about real estate.
Yep.
All right, we have a little bit of time
No,
left.
great
So
point. And
go ahead.
yeah. No, just one more thing I would add there is one thing we have seen is a lot of confirmation bias with if you ask leading questions, it'll try to confirm you as a individual. And might make you feel good, but that's not the point because you want it to be as objective as possible. So try not to ask leading questions. But I mean, I like how you phrase that, Trent. But yeah, we have seen a high degree of confirmation bias from even the latest models.
Actually, that was something that Sam Altman admitted was an issue. I think it was with GPT-4. There was way too
Yep.
much of that. And then so in GPT-5, they dialed it back a bit, but it's not, and in his own words, it's not zero yet. So definitely
Yep.
try and structure your questions from a skeptical perspective instead of show me why this will
Yep.
work. Because if you tell an AI to show you why it will work,
Exactly.
guess what it's going to do? It's going to show you
It
why it
will.
will work. All right.
Exactly.
So we're in an interesting economic time at the time of this recording. We have a government shutdown. We have a lot of unusual things happening in politics. We have rising interest rates. We have economic uncertainty. We've got tariffs galore. There's a lot going on right now.
Yep.
So I'm going to
Yep.
ask you just a few questions about the market and your market outlook, and then we'll wrap up for this particular interview. So we're going to begin with, what is your view of the commercial real estate cycle? Are we and we'll talk about the asset class that you specialize in, which isn't necessarily commercial real estate, because I know when you're building single family developments, that's not really commercial real estate. So you can answer this however you like, but are we in a buyer's market right now for the asset class that you are focused on most?
Yeah. So the crystal ball question. So we are actually consider commercial when we go above 5 units, right?
Okay.
So we're actually targeting short plats. So our 2026 construction pipeline, Trent, is primarily 20 to 25 unit townhome communities and single family home communities. And we're based in the Seattle area, in Seattle, Washington. I actually live east side, so Bellevue area. And yeah, it's definitely, I would say, a buyer's market from a residential standpoint. We're seeing rates come down, we're seeing activity pick up. I'm biased for sure, but I wouldn't be talking to you if I didn't really believe in what we're investing in, which is new construction. And if you look at all the headlines, all headlines say we're between 4 and 7 million homes short here in America, and that number is only growing. And so you've got things like tariffs, supply and labor constraints. Basically, since 2008, over 50%, 50% of home builders have left the industry. And what does that mean for us? That means we're going to enter, and we are in a very supply constrained atmosphere as far as residential real estate. So yes, we encourage our investors to look at the medium to long term, right? Things like supply constraints, things like aging populations, these are long term conditions that need to be addressed, right?
Mm.
And the 5 million homes short that we are today in America is growing to 10 million homes in the next 10 years as the American population grows. And so we believe in new construction. Yes, there's some ebbs and flows with interest rates and blah, blah, blah. But fundamentally, even with AI, people need to live somewhere. AI is not going to house you. That's why we're focused on residential new construction. Here in Washington, our population is predicted to grow by 28%. So almost one third more in the next 10 years. We're about 2 million people in greater Seattle. It's going to be 3 million in about 10 years, which is
Man.
crazy to think about.
Yeah.
Even California is going to be about 8% growth, which I don't know, California population is like, what, 10 million people at least, if not more.
It's like 26 or
And
27 million, I believe.
Yeah, overall. Yeah, yeah. I was saying more SoCal, but yeah, totally. Yeah. And that's a lot of people, even though people think that a lot of folks are fleeing California. Idaho is 27% up. Texas, another 28, 30% up. We need a lot more homes. And that's why we're focused on what we're doing with Limitless Fund. Yeah. So I think we are considered effectively commercial real estate when it comes to new construction. And we do believe that while it is a buyer's market right now in terms of where rates are at, overall, we have a supply problem and we need to address supply.
What's your view on interest rates and inflation over the next 12 months?
Interest rates have to come down. The US government is paying the same rate, right? And they can't afford to pay that kind of rate on the national debt. And so the rate has to come down. Inflation, unfortunately, we do see going up. And I think the Fed has done a decent job trying to keep that as low as possible, but I think it's just it's just a matter of time before that starts creeping back up again. And so we do see inflation edging back up as rates come down. Obviously, there's inverse proportion to that. And
So stagflation basically is your view.
it's hard to say stagflation. It depends how you count the CPI index and how you count jobs and
Hmm.
all that. And
Right
there's
now, we
definitely
don't
some
count anything.
controversy in how those. No, yeah, no, fair. Yeah. No, our GDP is growing overall. I think there are a lot of eyes on unemployment right now, especially what does AI mean for all of us?
Yeah.
Overall, AI is supposed to, and I actually believe this, AI will create more jobs than it actually replaces. So I think in one report I read, in a 10-year projection, AI would replace about, and don't quote me on this, we can probably link to it in the show notes, but AI would replace about something like 50, 60 million jobs, but it would create 70 or 80 million.
Mm.
Just the amount of creative work. And I believe actually entrepreneurship is about to take off,
Mhm.
Trent. Like we have never lived in a time of history where it's been so easy to start a company and
Oh,
build a
yeah.
company. Just if you just take a step back and think about it, you can literally have an idea. You can use AI for sales and marketing, for content generation, to build a website.
Yep.
You can drop ship products. You never even have to see them, right? You can like literally everything can is basically there's an e-commerce or a SaaS solution or an AI solution for you. So I really see I'm very bullish on this in terms of I think we are It's almost like an industrial revolution that's powered by AI for entrepreneurs. And so I'm encouraging as many people as possible, get out of your W-2 jobs and become an entrepreneur and investor. If you think about the whole cash flow quadrant, like move over to the I and the business owner as soon as possible.
All right, I'm not going to let us go too far off in that direction. We could talk about that for hours on end. Coming back to real estate, when you look at a new opportunity, what are the 2 to 3 deal metrics that instantly tell you if that deal is worth pursuing?
Yeah, great question. I think there's a bunch of metrics, and I think it depends on what you're looking for. In particular, we are looking at risk. That's one of the biggest things you're trying to address in real estate. One of the reasons that we like new construction is because of this. So we look at equity multiple, right? So if you invest 100,000 and you get 150,000 back, there's a 1.5x equity multiple. We don't like looking at IRR as much, just because there's ways to skew the IRR that gives you a false picture, right? So you can have a few years of crummy of bad cash flow in the first few years, and you target this like amazing exit in year 5, and it makes the deal look great.
Yeah.
But then what if you don't actually hit that exit?
Yeah.
Then your deal is just crap. So we like using yield on cost or equity multiple is a much better, I think, metric of looking at real estate in particular. And then also velocity of capital, right? Is this a 3-year deal, a 5-year deal, a 7-year deal? I think 5 is the new 7 and 3 is the new 5, right? And if you can get below 3, then even better.
All right. Where do you see the best opportunities in your market in the next 12 to 24 months? I think you've actually already answered this because you've said in 2026 you're going to be doing condos and multifamily.
Townhomes, yeah.
Okay.
I'd say just higher density products. So townhomes, very bullish on that. We're seeing, I wouldn't say an oversupply, but there's a lot of studios, 1s and 2s. The studio 1-bed, 2-bedroom apartments, and people want larger units. So 3 to 4 bedroom townhomes are a great product to address that. And then also built to rent, right? So we have a number of wealthy families, wealthy ultra high net worth who are approaching us and saying, hey, do build us some built to rent stuff. So we've got a bunch of other investments, but we want to build to rent and build to hold, say a 50 or 100 unit apartment complex or a townhome complex.
Yep.
So we're seeing more of that.
Yeah, I know that Fundrise, which is, we have some money with them personally. That's a big thing for them. They really like the build to rent model. And I'll give a plug to their podcast. Can't remember the name of it, but if you just Google Fundrise podcast, comes 1 episode a month. Ben, he's a particularly intelligent guy, and I always find their shows very interesting. So I want to wrap up. We're going to talk about tax for a minute, and I'm going to couch this by saying neither of us are tax professionals, and you should seek advice from your own tax professional. But I'm pretty sure I had this conversation with you last week, or maybe it was with somebody else. But it was around the idea, oh no, it was with somebody else. It was with one of the GPs. So I've been an LP investor for about 4 years now with a good friend of mine who's a GP at mobile home parks. And I said to him, I said, explain to me how the tax benefits can be realized when you are only an LP. And he gave me a very smart answer, because typically to be able to, thanks to this bonus depreciation, if you buy an asset yourself as the GP, you get huge deductions in the first year. But as an LP, you can only, or I think even as a GP, and this is where I want to say people get advice from your tax advisor. But those deductions, that bonus depreciation write-off cannot be used against W-2 income, but it can be used against passive losses, capital gains losses, and so forth, to the best of my understanding. But here's why I'm bringing this up. He has a couple of LPs who are married, and the gentleman in the relationship is the significantly higher earner than the wife. And obviously, it could go in either direction. So this is not gender biased at all. You've got a high earner and you've got a lower earner. If in this case, the lower earner in this family that he's was telling me about, she actually quit her job so that she could become what's called the designated real estate professional, if there's a better term for it, which requires that you invest more time in managing real estate than anything else. And it has to be a certain amount of time per year. I think it's about 700 hours, 750 hours per year. But what that unlocked for this family was the instant tax savings that they received was greater than her income. And for me, that was like a big unlock, because I'm like, how can someone who's a passive investor and still running their software company or as a tech exec or doing whatever, they don't necessarily have a lot of passive income. They don't necessarily have a lot of capital losses. So this bonus depreciation doesn't really do them any good in the short term, until Corey explained to me this situation. So I'm bringing it up because for folks that might be listening to this, maybe that's you, maybe that's your scenario. And hopefully then this would inspire you to go and talk to your tax professional, because I am not one. Shawn, do you have anything that you want to add to that? And if
Yeah,
not,
no,
that's
it's
okay.
a very powerful strategy. Yeah, no, you're pretty much spot on there, Trent. At least, again, not a tax professional, but yeah, basically, I wouldn't say it's a common loophole, but it's definitely not uncommon. Where, as you described, if a couple, say the husband is making $400,000 or $500,000 in W-2 income, and the wife is, say, stay at home, like in my case, my wife homeschools our four kids. She's full-time mom. She probably has a more difficult job than I do. If she, for example, gets her real estate license and is active with it, it's very important to keep clear documentation. So if you're ever audited, the IRS obviously can see
Yep.
the documentation and the proof. But yeah, if she say she spends 600-700 hours a year as a real estate professional, and so basically as a couple, if we're married filing jointly, we can basically treat that as our entire real estate portfolio, which we have several rentals and new construction, whatever else, can be treated as non-passive income. And so
Cool.
you can achieve a fairly large, you can probably get 150, $200,000 tax deduction against a four or $500,000 W-2 by using that strategy.
Which is significant. All right, Shawn, for folks who want to get a hold of you, I'm going to have a link to your LinkedIn down in the video description. So anyone who wants to reach out to you, they can. And for folks, if this is your first time listening to an Invest with Trent podcast and you like what you heard, two things that I recommend for you. Number one, you subscribe to it here on YouTube. But also number two, if you are an accredited investor, visit the Invest with Trent website, join the vetted deal list, so that when you're on that list, I will notify you of opportunities. Might like the name of the show, Invest with Trent. Basically, the promise is I'm investing in this stuff and I'm creating opportunities for other limited partners to invest in the very same deals that I'm investing in on the very same terms that I'm investing in. And oftentimes, as a fundraiser, I'm able to negotiate with a sponsor preferential terms, so you would actually be better off to invest through me than you would by going direct, because I'm bringing bigger checks than you are, and that gets the attention of general partners. So I want to thank everybody for spending some time with Shawn and I today. Shawn, I want to thank you for spending some time and sharing your knowledge with the audience. It was a pleasure to have you here, and it was a good.
No, likewise, Trent. It was a pleasure. Great show. And yeah, I would love to connect more with your audience, and the link will be down below.